If you're authentic, strategic, and consistent, you'll start to see a lot of benefits. Everyone is a creator of communications, of media. These are skills we should be teaching in school.
Produced by Podcast Architects.
Welcome back to the Path Forward here at TexED Con 23 in Dallas, Texas. I'm your host, Dr. Rick Fernandez. Got a special guest, J.W. Marshall. Sounds like a senator's name. I always want to say, sir, Congressman, how you doing today?
You know, I've been mistaken before at conferences like this, just attending a session for, oh, you must be with the TEA, just J.W. Marshall, or you must be some type of politician. I'm like, no.
But you're with Summit K12 that does a lot with superintendents and the education space. And here we have an opportunity to kind of collaborate and talk about some of the big issues that are out there. Well, it's always been an issue.
Yeah.
And it's how people are communicating and messaging. But in your experience, is it now more than ever a priority for a district, a community to figure out how they're going to do that and how they're going to do it well?
Well, it's not just districts, it's everyone. It's, vendors, districts, individuals, that have brands now. It is the way of the world. It's the 21st century. These are skills we should be teaching in school, and I'm seeing more and more districts really not just having what used to be their, school TV channel.
The AV.
The AV people, 10 minutes, right? But they're expanding outside of the walls, right? That everyone... I work in science also, and everyone's a scientist. That's, a new change that we're moving towards. Everyone is a creator of communications, of media, and whether they like it or not.
Yep.
Some, they want to do a lot of it. Some, you need to know the bare minimum to navigate this world that we're moving into. And so really, Summit K12, we do English language development, we do reading language arts, we do science, but we also do a lot of media because we see that as the future communication tool and really the present communication tool for everyone. And so it's really fun when we get to work with districts that we get to help inspire them and teach them kind of what we know so that they can do more of their own media. So we're trying to teach people how to fish. And some districts are really latching on. They're the early adopters. They've really had the support of the community. And others are lagging behind.
Yes.
And it's one of those things we feel like we need to be doing this. Okay, now we know we need to be doing this, but we don't know how. And so they're looking around going, what are other districts doing? And so I think those districts that want to be leaders in a lot of other areas, this is one that they need to be leading in. And I think for those districts that aren't necessarily considered a leader in other areas, this is an opportunity, a really big opportunity to show that you can build community within your walls, within your city or your town, but even show off the great work that you're doing outside, and that's going to help elevate everything in your district. And the students are going to get it. That's how students learn now. And so really connecting with them on their level, but not just dumbing down the content or trying to be, cheeky or, cool, and then it comes off as totally not cool, right? You got to do it in your own way and be authentic. I think that's the big piece of advice I would give for districts. If you're not doing media, not just social media, but video, podcasting, to communicate to all of your stakeholders, but especially your students in your schools, you need to do it, and you need to do it authentically. You don't have to do it perfectly if you can do it authentically.
I think that if we're being transparent, right, all districts are competing for students, whether it's public to public, whether it's charter, all of us want more students because more students drive funding, drive opportunity to do different programming. Is it fair to say every school district, everybody in it should be a communicator and a salesman for that district? Because we're at that time where if you're not doing it, somebody else is, and they're going to take your market share, which in this case are students.
Absolutely. I think, again, we need to practice what we preach. We need a model to students that you're always, you're selling, even if it's not a sales position, you're selling ideas. You're selling, that next program, that new program that's then going to impact student lives. You're selling the students on trusting you as the administrator, as the teacher, to, follow them down path A or path B. And so we're all selling whether we realize it or not, and to recognize it and to be intentional to get better at it, I think is key. And communication and sales aren't the exact same thing, but they are very closely related, right? The better you can sell, the better you can communicate. And so communication for me is a little more than mediums that you're using, right?
Uh-huh.
Whether that's a speech in front of a large audience, or that's a podcast, or that's a social media, or a TikTok, a 1 minute video. All of that is communication. And so I think the better we can get at it now, the better we're going to be at it down the road, because a lot of it just comes with experience. It comes with putting one foot in front of the other, trying new things, knowing not everything's going to work. And that's a great model to provide for your students too, right? That iterative process, that
Yep.
scientific process, that, hey, whatever we launch today, we know we may not use a year or two from now, but we got to start somewhere. And I think that's my urgent call to district leadership is you got to start now. You got to start before you get too far behind.
Is it partly the late adopters, if you will, or the ones that know but are hesitant? I feel like in this era, the mistake, we always say, hey, we want our students to be risk takers. We want them to be able to get out there and fail forward and all that stuff.
Fail fast.
Fail fast, fail forward, all that stuff. If you miss and you fail, particularly your superintendent, you fail in a large enough way, it puts your job at risk, it puts the district at risk, it can have lasting impact. Do you feel like that's a part of the hesitation for like, hey, we just got to lean into this thing and get with the times?
Fear of the unknown,
Yeah.
right? You've not done it before, it's uncomfortable. And really, failure doesn't often look like we did something and it had a big backlash, right? We said the wrong thing.
Right.
Failure usually looks like we tiptoed in and then it tapered off, and people go, oh yeah, we tried that podcasting thing, it didn't really work.
Yeah.
Well, you only did 4 episodes, and you did one a week for 2 weeks, and then you did one a month later, and then 3 months later, and that makes you look bad, because then people will find that online and go, what happened there, right? So I think the key is to have a plan, to be strategic as much as you can, but then be consistent. So I'm adding to my authentic, strategic, and consistent. You can't go wrong.
Right.
And people do have a pretty short attention span these days. So the episodes you did last year, yeah, there's an archive. People could go back, but most people are going to look for what you're doing now, what you're doing next.
Sure.
And so don't overthink the perfect medium, the perfect podcast episode, the perfect communication to the board or to the community. Just, again, if you're authentic, obviously spell check and run it through some kind of chain of command.
Somebody.
That you don't have somebody at a lower level speaking for the district in a way that you wouldn't represent
Sure.
the district well. But you have those protocols in place already for the most part. And now lean into them and don't be afraid, because if you don't, you're going to get passed by.
So what does it mean for business and how they communicate with schools, right? Because we're happy to be at a conference where there's learning, but there's always service providers, vendors wanting to provide a service to school districts, and not just school districts, but any entity. What does it mean for them to leverage their opportunities to communicate well and differently as we evolve and as everything is instantaneous and we need information now, and who can provide what now? How do businesses react to that?
The ones that are starting to do it are seeing a lot of success, a lot of ROI. What I would say to businesses is it's not instant, but it comes faster than you would think. So it's not your first episode, your first week, your
Right.
first month, but within 3 to 6 months, if you're authentic, strategic, and consistent, you'll start to see
The benefits.
a lot of benefits. And what you're doing is you're providing value to prospective customers, to your current customers, to the community at large. And anytime you provide value, people are going to talk, they're going to share it, they're going to tell people to come, they're going to want to be on your show if you decide to host your own show. And then you're adding value versus always, annoying people, cold calling, spamming with emails,
Yes.
all the things, the traditional things salespeople do in the past, business development people do in the past. I'm not saying you can't do those things. There's not a time or place to ask for something, but really giving value first and making the customer or the prospect the star of the show,
Sure.
giving them that platform, letting them share it out.
If you've done good work, they'll tell your story for you.
Exactly. And then as a marketing person, the best marketers are your customers.
Yes.
The best, they're going to believe.
It's a copycat league.
Exactly. They're going to believe your customers 1,000 times more than they're going to believe you.
How do you recommend or guide a client or someone that wants to start their own show? How do you keep them from, because they're passionate about this thing or this topic, from getting so deep or only staying here where the audience just narrow? Because everybody's passionate about something.
Yeah.
And I see that seems to be a trap that people fall into. Like, if you're passionate, you start narrowing down your audience because you don't realize that maybe that's a small percentage of people that are going to be interested to check you out for all the other great things you might have going.
Well, that's where the strategic part comes in.
Okay.
Because the bad news is you're competing not just against another district
Yes.
or another company. You're competing against Netflix. You're competing against
That's right.
LinkedIn and Twitter,
That's a
where
great
people
point.
spend their time.
Yes.
And so you do need to bring a level of quality. So I'd recommend to anyone that wants to get serious to enlist a little bit of third-party help, at least at the beginning, to help make sure that you're accountable to yourself and your goals, to help set those goals, and to help you really hone in on what are those, how big or small do we need to go? Because you want to cast a large enough net, you're making impact, but not too large of a net that you're just one of a million other
Sure.
things somebody could do. So you've got to find your niche. And I think for districts, it's starting within, because just taking care of your own house and your own teachers and your own students is very important. And then going out one level to the community around you, right? To the board, to the businesses that are partners with you, that are sponsoring things already. And then you decide where is enough, right? And not every podcast or show has to have millions of viewers, right?
Right.
It could be hundreds, maybe thousands, but if they're the right people, the right stakeholders, the right audience, that's success right there. So I would also, recommend not getting caught up in the numbers trap.
Gotcha.
Right. But if you're true to yourself, true to your audience, and you're inviting the right people on, eventually they'll share it out enough, and enough members will come on. The audience will grow. It'll take care of itself if you're focused in the right direction, and you have, somewhat of a narrow scope. Otherwise, you can't compete. You have something to say, but yeah, if you go too far down one topic or one thing, you could marginalize yourself into kind of, all right, we got 10 people that listen every week and that's about it. And they've all been on the show. So what do we do next? So start in your house, move out to your community. And for most districts, that's enough. And then for businesses, same thing. Start with your customers, start with your employees, use the people you know, and then work out, to the next level and the next level, and then decide how far do we want to take it.
Last question for you.
Yep.
It's the magic question. How do you recommend a district or an entity business select their host? Because a lot of people assume it's got to be the CEO, it's got to be the marketing person, but the host is important. And how do you say, okay, make sure that you consider these things?
So a couple different ways to select the host. Sometimes it's pretty clear cut.
Okay.
This person is our PR chair for a reason. They are great at this. They're very personable, passionate, and knowledgeable. A lot of times it could be one of a number of people. I would be open to multiple hosts sharing the duties initially, and then you may settle in on one or two. I wouldn't have a different host every time, right? So again, you want to kind of narrow that down. Usually I would recommend, sometimes even a third-party host initially, because they're going to be professional, they're going to follow the script, they're going to keep you on track, and initially having guests on that could potentially become your host. So almost a way of kind of screening,
I like that.
a couple of different people, see who takes to it as a guest first, and then say, hey, you want to co-host or you want to do one? And then that's a way a lot of people can kind of more strategically, because if you start with the wrong host, it's kind of hard to kick them out sometimes, depending on their personality. And so it is kind of an important part of that strategy is to think through who's it going to be, and if it's not clear, maybe even another thing I like to recommend, a weekly series is great, or a monthly, but sometimes just a mini series to start. You know what, we got this one important topic facing the school board or the school district. We want to do a multi-part, could be 3, could be 6 episodes from different key stakeholders. And, if nothing else happens, we'll know we did a quality project. Then typically that evolves into, wow, look at that response from the community. We should be doing this every week or every month. And so I think that's another strategic way to kind of not just dip your toe. You're committing, but you're not committing indefinitely to every week, 52 weeks a year.
I love it. Wise words. Thank you for sharing the wisdom, JW. Thank you for being on the path forward.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, and we'll hopefully be back again sometime soon.
You got it.
Produced by Podcast Architects.